Hey, so I'd like to delve a little bit deeper, go back and then move forward, and just spell out, to drop more, the statement of Rabbi Yochanan, that Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, chacham she'amar b'lashon Baal, Baal she'amar b'lashon chacham, lo amar klum. That you've got these two people who have been empowered to undo a neder in very different ways. You've got the Baal with his wife, the husband with his wife, the father with his daughter. It's one kind of annulment of vows. And the average person makes a vow, he goes to either three common people, and we're going to explore what that means in greater detail and even find a source where that three comes from. Where did three come from? Later on, very shortly. And in that way, any normal person bringing forth, giving over a neder, he wants to renege on it because of either there was a circumstance present at the time he made the neder that had he known, he never would have made the neder. That's called a pesach, a peta. Or because he just can't handle it. He regrets it. And we generally subscribe to the view that charata, regret, is enough to annul a vow, as we learned previously. Now, Rabbi Yochanan says when that undoing of the vows occurs, it is extremely specific, empowering us with the nuance and the subtlety of language that just like if you miss a letter in an email address, it won't get to where it needs to go. If you use the wrong language, it doesn't impact what it should impact. And there is a very different mechanism with the impacting of the annulment of the chacham versus the Baal versus the husband. When the husband annuls the vow of his wife, he's breaking it. It was a vow. Had she transgressed the vow, she would have to give due recompense. But from now onwards, it's annulled. Whereas the chacham, his annulment of the vow is an undoing. He's matir it, he unties it, and it was never there to begin with. It's retroactively undone. So therefore, the language has to be very pointed, because if you aim the wrong language and that language activates the wrong mechanism, it's going to be completely ineffective. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan tells us. There's a chacham, Rabbi Yochanan, a chacham she'amar b'lashon Baal. If the chacham says in the language of the Baal, he says mufar, he's doing the wrong activity, he's evoking the wrong mechanism, and it doesn't work. Similarly, a Baal that says in the language of the chacham, lo amar klum, it is nothing. That's Rabbi Yochanan's statement, part one. He brings a brisa. The brisa is going to be two brisas to support him, and we're going to see that in the second leg of the second brisa, we're going to be associatively pulled towards a whole new dimension of Nedarim, which is going to be power. Tasani, we learned in the Brisa, Ze'adovar. It says in the words that introduces us to the parsha of Nedarim, V'yidaber Moshe roshei hamatos. It's going to be very relevant. V'yidaber Moshe roshei hamatos, the leaders of the tribes. He's speaking to specific people. On them, he says, he speaks to them, El roshei hamatos, Livnei Israel, on behalf of the Jewish people. Lamor is saying, Zeh hadavar asher tzivah Hashem. Zeh hadavar, this hadavar asher tzivah Hashem. It's very specific. It seems to make a very specific reference, and from this, the Brisa learns Zeh hadavar, meaning only in this way. Hachacham matir and a Baal matir. This is a source in a Brisa to what Rabbi Yochanan is saying, that the chacham can matir, but the Baal can't matir. He can't use the lashon of haTorah. It has to be hafara. Sheyachol, that I may have thought to my chacham she'ein meifir matir. I thought, well, a chacham that can't be meifir, he can't use the lashon of mufar, but he can use the lashon of mutar. So he's weaker, he's limited. He can't do hafara. Baal shemeifir anything shematir. Baal who can, he should be able to also use the lashon of mutar. Talmud Leimar comes along the Torah and teaches me zeh hadavar chacham matir ein Baal matir. Now the question is this a real kal v'chomer? Because we're using zeh hadavar to limit it, but really the fact that the Baal can't use the lashon of matir haTorah is also learned out from Ze'adavar. So it's almost we need the Adavar to begin the Kal V'chomer, and we use the Adavar to end it. So the Ran points out that this is not a real Kal V'chomer, it's just like almost hard thing to say, but to just accentuate and to bring some kind of build-up to demonstrate the power of the Pasuk. That's the first brisa. The second brisa, which proves the other side of the coin, is Tanya Idach, another brisa says, Ze adovar Baal meifir ve'ein chacham meifir. The Baal can annul, but not the chacham. She'yochel amar thought the opposite. Uma Baal she'ein matir meifir. The Baal that can't be matir, can't use a lashon mutar, can't undo it retroactively. Meifir, yet he can annul it. Chacham she'matir, the chacham that can undo it retroactively, he can use the lashon of Torah. Inudin she'meifir, surely should be able to be meifir. Talmud loymar, Ze'adavar comes along, Ze'adavar, to teach me Baal meifir and chacham meifir. Only the Baal can use Hafarat and not the chacham. And there we have two brises which substantiate Rabbi Yochanan, and that's, I would say, Rabbi Yochanan is a statement supported by two proofs, which we'll call A and B. Attached to the end of this brisa, there's a whole new dimension of Parashas Nedarim, which is very fundamental and in a certain way precedes the conclusions of the language of chacham and goes to the very root of who can be the people or the person in charge of Hafarat Nedarim, and an interesting application of Hafarat Nedarim to a diverse and very disparate halachic inyan, which is the notion of shchutei chutz. Shchutei chutz literally means the ones that are slaughtered outside. Outside of where? Outside of what and why they're being slaughtered. Just like in the Beis HaMikdash, the form of worship would be to be makriv a korban, to offer up an offering through slaughtering and the zrikas adam, spreading of the blood, throwing of the blood on the mizbech, the altar. If a person decided to do the same thing, dedicate, makdish, a korban, an animal to Hashem, set up his own little personal altar and slaughter it there, that is an isur kores. It's a prohibition which is extremely, extremely severe. So we're going to somehow make some level of collaboration, intellectual collaboration between these two different and disparate elements of the Torah, which is unexpected, to say the very least. How do we do that? How do you find a common connection between these two disparate areas in halacha? We use a communication method, an internal Torah communication method. There are many ways, as we've stated multiple times, that the written Torah is not a narrative, it's a code. And one of the ways of deciphering the code is called a gezeirah shavah. A word in one place in the Torah can be connected to a similar word, or ideally the same word, in another place in the Torah. And once that connection has been made, you can switch across any laws from one side to another. And in doing so, you can create a completely different halachic mechanism through the transfer of halachas. And that's exactly what's going to happen over here, which is going to actually transform Hafarat Nedarim into something that never would have been had we not linked it up to shchutei chutz. And therefore, even though this section of the brisa wasn't necessary for the initial statement of Rabbi Yochanan, it's associatively developed. There's two things Gemara works, which is very much aligned to the way that our minds work. On the one hand, in order to be clear thinking, we need to have a thought process that we can follow down a line. We can't get distracted. On the other hand, our brains work associatively, and that's why distractions work. We think about this, and then that connects me to this. I think about, oh my gosh, that chair looks comfortable. When was the last time I sat in that chair? Oh, it was at Aunt May's house. Oh my gosh, do you remember the cake I had in Aunt May's house? When was the last time I had cake? Oh my gosh, I have to go on a diet. Associative. But at the same time, we can also, and that's a lot of creative thought is based on that, but there's also the straight down the line, following a logical train of thought. Now, the Gemara does both. On the one hand, it's deeply associative and brings in things which are not part of a linear progression. At the same time, it has a linear progression as well, obviously balancing out the two sides of our brain, the right and the left, making complete harmony, as Torah tends to do with everything in life, but always the middle, putting everything together. And that's what Torah is tiferes. It's beautiful. It's emes, like Yaakov. So now, we have this tail end of the brisa, which brings in shchutei chutz. Ne'emar kan ze'adavar. It says in Parashas Nedarim ze'adavar. V'ne'emar lahalan. It says elsewhere over there ze'adavar b'shchutei chutz. It says it also about shchutei chutz, this offering of the animal outside of the confines of the Beis HaMikdash. Just like b'shchut echutz, Aaron, Uvana, v'chol Yisrael, just like in shchut echutz, it's not only interesting. It's not only who would we have perhaps thought would have been a candidate who'd be liable for shchut echutz. Suppose we would have thought it's the Kohanim. They're the ones that do the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. So maybe only on them is incumbent the prohibition to shecht animals outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So I would have perhaps limited only to the Kohanim. Comes along Shchut Echutz and extends it to Aaron, Uvan of his children, V'chol Yisrael, and all of the Jewish people. So just like by Shchut Echutz, it's Aaron, Uvan, V'chol Yisrael. Af Parshas Nedarim, Aaron, Uvan, V'chol Yisrael. It's everyone. What does it mean? Just like normally when you have a very specific din, the transferal is very clear. So, for example, it says in the classic example of gezeirah shavah is the way that we learn that a woman can be married through kesef, through monetary means. And it's learned out from Avraham Avinu, who acquired the field of the cave of Machpelah from Ephraim Hakiti. And it says over there, Nosati kesef hasadeh kach mimeni, I've given the money of the field, kach, that use the word kach, take. And it says by marrying a woman, ki yikach ish isha, it says kach there. So because it says kach in the acquisition of a field and kach in the taking of a woman, we can recognize, or we can take the acquisition process, monetary acquisition, and we can transfer it to betrothal of a woman. It works. This is then it gets transferred. Over here, there's too much ambiguity. Just like it's all of the Jewish people there, so just all of the Jewish people over here. What does that mean? All of the Jewish people can annul vows, all of them, one of them, three of them, specific Jewish people, very unclear at this stage. And then that either way, whatever that limud is, it goes from shchut echutz to Hafarat Nedarim. Just like over there, it's everybody. So to over here, it's everybody, whatever that means. And just like over here, in regard to Nedarim, it's speaking to the leaders of the tribes, whatever that means, the leaders. What is that component? Is it their leadership, their knowledge, their expertise in a particular area or in all areas of halacha? But whatever those Rosh HaMatos are, those leaders of the tribes are, just like in Nedarim, it speaks to the Rosh HaMatos, the leaders of. So too, Lahalan Rosh HaMatos, in Shchut Echutz, it's the leaders. What does that mean? So this is the brisa, which is the tail end of the brisa, which was quoted to support Rabbi Yochanan, which gives us a whole new vantage point of Nedarim, which we as of yet don't know, and Shchut Echutz, by the way, and it's only brought along as the tail end of a brisa, which we didn't need it for itself. It just came along with the rest of the brisa. But now that we're here, becomes associative. Now we explore it. So we want to understand, what is this all about? So the Gemara starts to ask, and I'm just going to count the parts. And I'm going to actually call the first part a statement, which is Rabbi Yochanan. The second part, the first brisa was a raya, and then the second brisa is a further raya. We can call that A or B. If you want to, we can call that 1, 2, and 3. So you have a statement, raya 1, raya 2, and now we've got, following in the Gemara, part 4 is the Gemara begins, but Parshas Nedarim l'mayitulsa. The Gemara essentially asks our question. We switched over, just like there's everyone in Shchut Echutz, so too it's everyone in Hafarat Nedarim, but for what halacha? What is the relevance of this? So the Gemara is inquisitive. It's asking. It doesn't know. And that's part 4 of the Gemara, asking an information question. Tell me what specific halacha is being transferred. And the Gemara answers, Amar v'achabi Yaakov, lahafshir shloishe hejoitis, to permit 3 normal people to annul the vows of another. Now this is tricky, because as I mentioned, Kiddushin, there's a halakhic mechanism that you see in place A, and then you move it to place B. Over here in Shchut Echutz, there's no 3 people. There's no 3 people that you're moving across. It's everyone. And when we move everyone across to Nedarim, seemingly it becomes 3 people. Very bewildering. And don't worry, we're going to look inside to the Ran, and he's going to resolve this. I just want to go a couple of stages forward in the Gemara before we do that. So that's what we're saying is part 4 of the Gemara was the question. Part 5 is the answer. After the Gemara is asked and answered, it then has a kasha. V'ha roishe hamatos ksiv. How can you say we're permitting 3 normal people to matir and neder, permit the neder? The Torah specified roishe hamatos, the leaders of the tribes. Not anyone can do it. So over here, you can't bring this gezeirah shavah in a way that it undermines the very nature of the pasuk, which is explicitly stated. Problem. That's a problem. The Gemara, so that we have the statement Rabbi Yochanan, Raya 1, Raya 2, question, answer, kasha, which is part 6, and in part 7 we have a resolution. Amar Rav Chisda v'item Rabbi Yochanan b'yachid mumche. Says Rav Chisda, and there are those that said it was Rabbi Yochanan. What we're talking about in Nedarim is that the person empowered to annul the vow is a yachid mumche, an expert, an individual expert. One person who's an expert. What? I didn't get that. There was a problem and there was a resolution. I have no idea how this resolution resolved that problem. So I want you to just sustain or wait for us to unfold this, and we're going to utilize the Ran to take us on this journey of understanding through the shaklan Torah of the Gemara. I want you to look at the Ran. The Ran says in Amar of Acha B'Yaakov l'hakshir shloshe jotis. So it's like approximately halfway down the thin lines, the narrow lines of the Ran on the outside of the page. Amar of Acha B'Yaakov l'hakshir shloshe jotis. We look at where's the Ran geographically located? Whenever we look at the Rishon, we want to understand the geography. Where's he geographically located? He's in the Gemara's resolution to the problem that we asked on how can you possibly, what is it that you're transferring from Shvutei Foot to Nedarim? And the answer given was to permit 3 normal people to matir and neder. So it's in part 5 of what we saw, and it's Rabbi Yaakov, and the gezeirah is the same. Starts with the Ran with a contention. Unrelated to the explanation, he gives us a definition. The Rishonim, the Meforshim have multiple functions. One of them is to exclude and explain. And says the Ran, the word idiotus could be an ambiguous word. I need to define it in the context of Nedarim. Says the Ran, hi idiotus da amrinon. When it says, and we're in the words of the Ran, this idiotus that we say, lav kulu idiotus kisherin. This doesn't permit that any normal person would be fitting to annul vows. Rather those that when you explain something to them, they actually understand it. So the Ran says, Hidyotis doesn't mean any person. You pick a person on the street, you have the street, 3 of them, and they're matir and neder. They have to understand the way halachic mechanisms work. If they're completely uninformed, they don't understand what a neder is. They don't understand what matir means. They just say, okay, like sometimes when you meet people who haven't had the benefit of a Jewish education, and you say, will you join us in a minyan? They don't understand the context. They don't really understand minyan, prayer, but they'll be happy to sit there and do it. Why not? Do a favor for another Jew. That's not going to work for our Torah and Torah. They have to have a level of comprehension of what's going on. They have to understand that there was a neder, that neder created an isur deraisa, and through our words we're going to completely undo that, and as if it's now null and void, as if it never ever was. They need to be able to grasp that. So they have to understand the mechanism of Nedarim to a certain degree, and you may have to explain it to them. They may not know it off the cuff, but they have to have the capability to understand it. The second part of the Ran brings a proof to this. This is actually spelled out explicitly earlier on in Daf Chaf Gimel Amud Aleph. And the Ran says, and based on this understanding of what hedjotis are, people that you can explain to them, and then they'll know what to do because they'll understand the mechanism. That's what the Jerusalem Talmud, the Talmud Yerushalmi says, "V'hanyu degarsini b'Yerushalmi shloisha shehen yodim liftoyach matirin kazakin." 3 people that know how to open up a neder, they can permit a neder like a wise man, a zoken, a wise old man. So what did that phrase mean? What does it mean that they know how to open? Know how to open, what does that mean? Says the Ran, since we know that shloisha yotos, the way the Gemara describes the people that can matter, and that are shloisha yotos. And since the Yerushalmi says, who are those people? Those 3 are the ones that know how to open it up. What does know how to open up mean? Says the Ran, it means that you can explain to them and they get it. And therefore the Yerushalmi means the same as the Bavli. It's not a different criterion. It's the same one as us. And that's how the Ran puts together the basic understanding of what the shloisha yotos are. Now, then the Ran says there's a problem here. There's a deep problem over here. It says the Ran, "V'nir ba'enai," it appears in my eyes, I have a problem. "Denehit v'lo shavu nedarim b'shutei chutz." Granted, nedarim are not equal to shutei chutz. Daha b'shutei chutz kulahu shavu. Because in shutei chutz, any single Jew, regardless of where he's at, his intellectual component, about his capacity to understand, completely irrelevant. Kulu shavah, they're all equal for loy meklama gezeirah shavah, and therefore the gezeirah shavah cannot stand. Says the Ran, I have a problem. I have a deep problem over here. The way that you use a gezeirah shavah, if you take a pre-existing halacha in case A, and you use the gezeirah shavah to extend it to case B. But over here, the pre-existing halacha by shchutei chutz was anyone can do it, and when you apply it to nedarim, it becomes very limited, so you're not taking it across. So what's going on? It doesn't work. There's no gezeirah shavah over here, and you can see that in the crosshairs of the Ran, he's shooting at. Who's he shooting at? Who's his kasha asked on? It's based on what he previously said. I that said hedjotos means not everyone, but very specific people. I'm not in trouble, because if I say that the gezeirah shavah is now sabotaged, it can't work, it's not transferring the right din, answers the Ran, loy kasha, that's not a problem. Loy kasha media, it's not a problem at all. The mimela mashma, it's automatically implied, hi kedine for hi kedine. Each one according to its own halachic parameters. This one like its law, and that one like its law, meaning as follows. Yes, we are transferring the principle, but we're also cognizant of the context. The principle goes across, but the principle has to be received in the context where it falls. It can't just become a random plopping down, superimposing of a random, it has to fit into the halachic mechanism where it lands. The halachic mechanism of nedarim is a mechanism which supports the idea it can be everyone. But in that mechanism, the everyone is a different everyone to shchutei chutz, because the whole nature of the operating mechanism of nedarim has its own parameters. So you can take across the notion of everyone, which means it's openly accessible to all, but still, and they need to be able to do the job. If they don't understand anything, they can't do the job. So they're everyone, but only the everyone that are everyone in the world of nedarim. And that's why the Ran goes on to say, because the Joitis, they're so lowly that once you explain to them, they still don't understand. Sabi de bahasa ninhu. These are lowly people. And obviously it's clear they can't be employed to permit the nedarim to keep it savri klal. They don't understand what's going on. Because even when they permit, they don't know what they're doing. In other words, in the context of nedarim, who is called a person? Only someone that you can explain it to and he understands. Otherwise, that's not a person. So you do transfer the din from shchutei chutz. Just like in shchutei chutz, it's everyone who's capable of doing shchutei chutz, which is everyone. So too in nedarim, it's everyone that's capable of mating a neder, which is not everyone. It's only the people they can understand. And therefore, it is a direct transfer. Well, beautiful, beautiful work from the Ran. And now we go further in the Gemara. The Gemara says, So we've done the one side we've explained the one component of the transferal of the din, but what we actually didn't explain was what was the give and take of the Gemara from it says, how can you bring that across? Didn't we limit it to Rosh Hashanah? No, Yakin Mumche. What was that all about? So look at the words of the Ran. Again, continuing the Ran. Says the Gemara's Kasha. It's aimed at the gezeirah shavah. This gezeirah shavah can't work because the place that you're extending it to has a built-in exclusion of the extension. What's a built-in exclusion? Only Rosh Hashanah. And you're saying everybody. You can't take something across which the destination is saying, don't come here. We can only have Rosh Hashanah. We can't have everyone. How do you resolve that? Answers around b'yachin mumche, the kiven, the gezeirah shavah mar b'jotis. Since the gezeirah shavah includes a jotis. For Rosh Hashanah, memayet lahu. So now he says like this. We want to make peace between these two things. Both are valid Torah positions. It's valid to exclude anyone else but the Rosh Hashanah, and it's valid to extend the din of everyone to Nedarim. So how do we reconcile it? We have to reconcile it. Says the Ran, Al Torkach is lehu lekiyum Torah v'ayu. Against our will, we have to keep both of them. Rosh Hashanah is b'yachid, v'hejoitis b'shloisha. And how do we do that? We say that Rosh Hashanah means it's an option. It's an option. It's not a singular, and it's not the only option. It's a option, an option. So in other words, as follows: Rosh Hashanah is only these people can do it. The Shiur tells me anyone can do it. How do we reconcile that? We say only these key people can do it by themselves. Whereas when it's everyone, you need three people. So it's true, yes, it's only to the Rosh Hashanah to do it to themselves. Everyone else, they need three people. So why three people? Why not two people? It can't be one person, right? But one or two people. How do we get three people? Asks the Ran. Answers the Ran. Since we can't say it's one person because that would be an open contradiction to Rosh Hashanah. So it has to be more than one. We make it three like Beis Din. So according to the Ran, this is a shoresh, this is a makor, this is the origin of why you need three people to be matir and neder. It's because since when you switch across this gezeirah shavah, we know everyone can do it, but we have to reconcile the fact that only the Rosh Hashanah can do it. So we have to say the Rosh Hashanah can do it by themselves, and everyone else can't do it by themselves. So how many do you need? Well, it can't be one because then they'd be the same as Rosh Hashanah. What about two? He says the minute it's not one, we try to put it in something which has some kind of precedent, something which is already a formal body that can do stuff. A formal body that can do stuff is three, and the precedent there is Beis Din. So we make it Beis Din-like, and therefore, as a result, it makes most sense that if it's not a singular person, it must be like a Beis Din, and therefore it's three, and that serves as the foundation of why you need three hejotis to annul a vow, which I feel is very clarifying, especially if we think back to the previous sugyas of the conflict that we had of being matir nedarim on Shabbos, and why that may be a problem, because it's mischazi kedina, as if you recall, Rabbi Yosef said before Abaye dismantled his connection, but that's what Rabbi Yosef held, that it's a din. Why is it mischazi kedina? Because it's deliberately structured around the precedent of Beis Din. Makes a lot more sense what we're testing about in the Gemara and Daf Ayin Zayin, Amud Aleph and Amud Beis. Continues the Gemara, and it says, B'shchutei chutz l'mahil sasa. In shchutei chutz, what's the corresponding, the other side of this gezeirah shavah? What do we learn? How do we learn Rosh Hashanah all the way to Shiur? What does it mean? What does it even mean? Like we asked from Parshas Nedarim initially, the Gemara answers, Amrav Sheishis Leima Sheishayla Behekdesh. It's to say that you can ask, you can undo something that you were already makdish. Meaning, from the fact that we see that the Rosh Matters are empowered to undo Nedarim, we extend that all the way to Shchut Echutz to say, what would happen if a person went and he dedicated this animal to the Beis HaMikdash, and then he slaughtered it outside of the Beis HaMikdash, and in doing so he was over in Issachar. Well, too bad, mate, you're in massive trouble. What would be if after him doing that, he regretted it, and he said, I would like to undo my original dedicating Hakdosha, being makdish the animal, and I want to undo the Hakdosha. I want to say, I don't like the consequences, and I want to make it that the neder, commitment I made to bring up this korban to the Beis HaMikdash, I would like to undo it. How does that work? We learn out from Hafarat Nedarim that just like a chacham can undo a neder which a person makes himself, so too in Shchut Echutz, a chacham can undo a person's hakdosha, and retroactively the korban that he dedicated and is shechted outside of the confines of the Beis HaMikdash becomes completely permitted to him. The act in hindsight is permitted because the chacham says that which you dedicated the animal to be Kodesh, we understand that dedication can be undone, can be matir, and then the animal was never Kodesh, and all you did was you shechted a normal animal outside the Beis HaMikdash, and that would be perfectly legitimate. And Mir Hashem, we'll continue from here onwards, the Shitta of Beis Shammai soon. Come join me, Rabbi Siegel, on the Soul Safari, a 5-day retreat in the heart of the African bush. Step away from the noise, routine, and distractions of everyday life and make a space to hear the quieter voice within. Through game drives, deep Torah insights, meaningful conversations, and evenings under the stars, we will reconnect with clarity, purpose, and perspective. It's set in a beautiful luxury lodge, and this will be a chance to reset, reflect, and move forward. If you feel ready for something real, come join me. August 2nd to the 9th, 2026, the Soul Safari.